For now, I thought I'd just get us kicked off with a question that certainly has been on my mind, and perhaps some of yours, during those sessions. And that is, so is there a model anymore? Certainly, when we look back at the TV ad, which Matt showed at the beginning, there was certainly a kind of model for doing TV advertising. There was a way in which it was done. You could train marketeers on it. But, I mean, Babs, in your role, you have to digitize brands globally. Is there a standard way in which this stuff can be rolled out?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, a lot of people have talked about the idea of the nature and the fundamental blocking and tackling, so to speak, of marketing doesn't really change. I mean, taking into account those things and then, you know, building them for kind of the digital era is the way to go. We've been working on building this quote-unquote digital roadmap for some time, which we think we now have a model. I know, you know, we've worked with you a little bit. We have a model as it relates to all digital campaigns that leverages kind of, you know, Web 2.0 tools, sharing, syndicating content, how to use websites. So we have kind of an approach there. And then the broader model is about shifting certain capabilities within the company to address what needs to be done. So again, I talked about HR and the talent and people skills. We talked about technology platforms. We talked about, you know, the marketing academy, so to speak, the kind of our center of excellence to really engage in training and really like laser-focused training in kind of how to use digital in a different way. So I mean, there is a model. You just have to kind of organize it appropriately for your types of brands and your types of company. You have to do a lot of digging deep and looking under the hood to figure out what that model is. But I think it stems with this idea of shifting from interruption-based 30-second television advertising that is the foundation of everything you do to something that is more about engagement and a combination of this idea of, you know, paying for some advertising, but also developing your own assets and word of mouth and earned media that is significantly or exponentially more opportunistic than it has been in the past when people just told friends, as opposed to now where you can see messages just explode because of the nature of the internet.
So we can start to create a model, perhaps. Ivan, what would you say to that question?
I mean, I'd echo what Babs says. I think it is about getting the right talent in, and it's not about getting digital people with digital talent. It's about getting talented marketeers that understand how we do this. I think the more interesting thing about the model, even though I would say the paradigm is still the same, the structure and the process you go through needs to be the same, we need to change the time frame in which we do it. So, you know, real-time reaction, real-time capability to address personal messaging, I think, is really what we need to develop the capabilities to do. So I think old model, new speed is kind of what I'd be going on.
Excellent. Old model, new speed.
There's also two other issues are agencies and funding. So I mean, I think there's a shift in the way that funding is appropriated as well from kind of this, again, all into paid advertising to something that's put more into some level of production to maximize your content, your assets, and then the ability to make those kind of, you know, explode in earned media. So there's some shift in that. And then the agency model, I mean, you know, historically we've used creative ad agencies as the centerpiece of our partnerships, and you know, now you have PR agencies, digital agencies, media agencies, creative agencies, all kind of in the same space, and you have to figure out the appropriate model for your particular objectives to get to where you need to be, because I don't think you can any longer expect the creative agency to run everything and then expect a huge shift by putting the other agencies in kind of siloed places. I think you have to figure out kind of the right way to work with all those agencies.
Fantastic. And we have a session coming up at the end of today around transforming the agency model. It'll be interesting to perhaps retouch on some of that when we get to that session. Let me open up the floor to questions. There's roving mics to the left and right. So if you want to raise your hand if you have a question. There's one in the middle here on the right-hand side. Do you want to let us know who you are and what your question is?
Yeah, Elaine Roberts from Vodafone, but I'm about to move to British Gas, which will probably say where my answer's coming from. So a lot of experience of what mobile internet does, but my world is actually the B2B world. And so I'm just curious, everybody's talking about where digital marketing's going and the application of social media in a consumer space. I can't see anybody talking about it in a B2B space. And I wondered if you thought that was because of the demographic, or just nobody's got there yet. Is it appropriate, or is there somebody who's doing it brilliantly?
Well, for me, my focus is consumers. That's what I discuss, and that's what my experience is. And so I'm sure, I mean, there's a lot of companies whose, it's all a matter of who your audience is and what you're trying to do, but I think a lot of the same things apply, and I'm sure there's quite a bit of effort going into that as well, but it's not really something I do much work with.
I actually think everything that we've been talking about is equally applicable. You know, it's about understanding who you are, who you're trying to get to, what it is that you can do, and how digital can play a role. And I actually think people are doing it pretty well in the digital space with things like, you know, apps that you can download to your phone that tell you whether your taxi driver's coming on time or that sort of stuff. The thing that I think is really interesting is taking that thought of how you do personalized scale in the business-to-business world, and I think that's the challenge. That, you know, 90% of the agencies in here today will be giving you their cards to help you answer when you get to British Gas.
There was something actually, Ivan, that you said during your session. You mentioned the Wall Street analyst who quoted something about Amazon from 2004. So that's 6 years ago now. And my question, I guess, is quite simple. You know, we've been talking about this whole topic for actually quite a long time. So what is the gap between talking and doing? And how do we move from conferences like today to a world where, you know, marketeers, their agencies are genuinely, you know, doing things differently, not just once, but consistently, time and time again? So what's the gap between talking and doing?
I think there's twofold. One is, you know, a lot of agencies, a lot of clients, a lot of businesses have a vested interest in just incrementally changing what they've done before, rather than transforming it to take digital into account. The other thing about it is I think we need better evidence that all of this stuff actually works and does great things. So, you know, we put up the Tipex guy, we talk about Office Max, you know, we do get results, but can we sort of scale them across everything that we do and make them cost effective? Because sure, the media space is not costing as much as the old world media, but the effort that goes into it probably is. So I think we've been talking, the people who are doing the doing are the people who do digital, the Googles, the Amazons, the eBays, the Facebooks, people who've been developing applications and technologies are the people that I think are the most interesting. So a lot of the global clients Naked works with, you know, we are starting to connect big media corporations with big global clients together and see how they can develop stuff together. But the big caveat in all of that is you still need people who are capable of creating brilliant ideas. And, you know, I've got a point of view about where they come from that's slightly different to Babs.
Yeah, so I think that there is a gap, but I think it's all relative as well. You know, if you think about the ad that you showed on the television, the Barbie thing, that was 10 years after the fact, and there was still a long way to go. So I think some of that is relative, but I do think that there's more changes than we think that are happening, but I expect to see more and more. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, there's a ton of things that are shifting. It requires a lot of change in a lot of different functions in a lot of different areas. It requires a mindset change. It requires a level of experience that a handful, you know, pockets of people have. And there's, you know, there's senior management that is used to a specific way of doing things and generating results over a long period of time. And that stuff doesn't happen overnight. But I think we're seeing a lot of traction and a lot of movement. I know some of our competitors are as well. And you're starting to see some big actions being taken. So, you know, it doesn't happen overnight, but I think you will see real change.
We've had some really good views from both of you. Almost out of time, I'm afraid. So in the dying minute or so, could each of you give us perhaps one piece of advice for everyone in the room as to something that they might do or think about or change in the next 6 months? What would you say?
In the next 6 months. I mean, I would, you know, some of the things I talked about, I would do two things. One of which is force your senior management to get engaged. I think a lot of activity happens much faster and you become much more nimble when people hear those messages from the people that they really see as the ones driving the leadership agenda of a company. And then I would say, you know, the whole idea of living the space is critical. I think for all of us in our ages, we have to start doing these things, experiencing these things ourselves. I know when I started doing that in a big way, a lot of ideas came to me, and we put those in place and it becomes very contagious. And it's very difficult to really be, even if you're a really creative person and you're typically have had great success and things like that, if you don't really understand, I mean, I can point to so many examples of, just seeing results from a particular campaign and not really understanding. We saw the results, but not understanding why the results were what they were, and the types of tweaks you can make or changes you can make to significantly change the results of that, which is the way you have to think in order to be able to reframe how to use different media. So I would really encourage you, get on social media, start using apps. If you have to, get the technologies the consumers are using and use them regularly. As marketers, we can't really afford to be like, I'm not techie, and that's not what I do. In today's world, you have to be in this space.
And a brief answer from me. One thing to do in the next 6 months is hire the best ideas agency in the world, which you'll see in a moment is still Wieden & Kennedy, and set them the task of producing a brilliant campaign that works better than Old Spice, but just in a simple text message, and then be prepared to pay them $2 million to do it.